Hello and welcome to the Wild Winter Women YouTube channel. I am Leah with a daily recording to provide commentary on the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is a human-powered race taking place right now in Alaska. Today is currently the afternoon of Sunday, March 9th. I have some general updates on the race, and today we have a special guest, Jessie Gladish. Jessie just finished the 350-mile Iditarod Trail Invitational, or ITI for short, on skis. Jessie finished the race in 6 days, 12 hours and 30 minutes, and was the second woman finisher on skis, coming in after Tracy Curry, who was on the show a few days ago. And Tracy set a new course record for women on skis, and Jessie's time was also below the previous course record set 2 years ago. Also with Jessie's finish, she was inducted into the Triple Threat Club, which recognizes athletes who have completed the 350 in all three modes of transportation available in the race: ski, bike, and run, over 3 different years. So the first was Lars Danner in 2020, then Amber Bethy in 2022, then Gavin Woody in 2023, and then this year, Jessie. And she was the only new inductee into the Triple Threat Club this winter, in the 350. There sounds like there might be some couple coming in the 1,000. Mm-hmm. So in addition, Jessie had a full winter leading up to this, taking the win in the 600-kilometer or 375-mile Montane Yukon Arctic Ultra, which wrapped up just a couple weeks before the ITI started. So Jessie, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm excited to talk to you too.
Great. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everybody, my name is Jessie Gladish, and I'm currently in Dawson City in the Yukon, but I was born and raised in Whitehorse, which is also in the Yukon, but a little bit further south than I'm living right now. So that's me.
Great. So how did the race go for you this year?
It went really well overall. I was really happy with my time. My goal is always really just to finish. And then I had a couple secondary goals, one of which, was, I was hoping that I could maybe come in under the women's record, which was 7 days or it was around 7 days. After the first couple days, I wasn't sure, I felt like I was moving slow and wasn't sure if I was going, to make that. So I sort of let that goal go a little bit. And then closer to, once I was kind of 5 days in, I was like, oh, maybe I will get under 7 days. So kind of went for it with the last couple of days that I had and came in under the 7-day mark. And the other goal that I had was to come in under my foot time, which was 7.5 days. So that was one of them. And then the current or the old ski record. And so I got both of those done and came in second to Tracy Curry, who totally crushed it out there. It was amazing to see her at the finish line. And she had a great race and well-deserved new record to hang on to for as long as she can.
Yeah, awesome. And so at the end, the last couple of days, were you kind of pushing more than you had earlier in order to come in with your time goal?
Yeah, I think, I pushed it in the first couple of days and I pushed in the last couple. I pulled some pretty big days off, especially early on in the race. I think I didn't sleep until I got to Squentna on, so it would have been 24 hours to, 2 p.m. the second day, but, day one. And then it wasn't until that evening at Squentna that I got a bed there, which was such a good call. I got there at 10:30 at night. So it was really good timing to have an actual rest, because I did try to sleep at Yentna. So I rested there for 2 hours and I had a meal, but I didn't sleep. So I definitely pushed a lot of hours in the beginning, and sort of surprised myself, I think, with how far I could go on foot in a day. Like, I mean, I was on skis, so,
Mm-hmm.
the conditions are favorable, then you can generally go slightly faster than walking, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely pushed in the first couple days, and then I had a big rest at Pentilla, and that was sort of where I was like, had a lot of foot pain and was sort of feeling like I needed an actual rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then in the last couple of days, I pushed basically from Bear Creek cabin to McGrath with no sleep. So
Wow.
yeah, a little rest in Nikolai, like I chilled out there for a couple of hours, but yeah, I would say my like sleep was sort of in the middle couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of pushed on the front in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. And how did that go skiing on the ice? Like up until, because it was like bare ice pretty much for the first, what, like until Squetna? I don't know where you would say that the snow actually started.
Yeah, the real snow didn't start technically until Squentna, because the river, the Yentna River, was, it had a skiff of snow on it, but it was pretty icy. Like even like the ski poles, if you didn't have, I didn't even think about this, but apparently one of the other skiers sharpened his ski tips, like his ski pole tips. And I definitely felt like I didn't have a whole lot of purchase on the ice. So yeah, I would say the good snow started at Squentna, but I was on my skis more or less most of the time starting at Big Lake. So Big Lake was the first time that I've like skied on ice.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up cross country skiing. Like I've been on cross country skis since I was 2, and used to do a little bit of racing and that sort of thing until I started snowboarding when I was 13, and sort of let the skiing go for a little while. And now I do it recreationally. But yeah, I'd never like really skied on ice before. And I was like, oh, I guess, I'll put my skis on here and see, because everybody else was like, double poling across it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so double poled across Big Lake, and then the trail was awful, like very awful from Big Lake to Butterfly. It was actually really bad from Big Lake all the way to the river.
Hmm.
So into Butterfly Lake and out. It was just like a roller coastery kind of like, it was either ice patches or dirt patches and
Oh,
grass. So it was
okay.
like a lot of off on with the skis. And yeah, I actually like bailed, like crashed like quite a bit,
Hmm.
which is not like, I'm usually pretty cautious and like I know what I can and can't do, but with the backpack on, it definitely threw my balance off, um, especially on the icy patches. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I had some falls where I was like really lucky that I didn't break a piece of gear or a binding or something like that. And I actually like dented my coffee thermos really bad on
Oh,
one of the crashes. I was like, oh, thankfully that was not anything else.
yeah. Right.
But yeah, so that section was pretty tough. And then the rest of the skiing pretty much, to McGrath, like when there was skiing, other than that, like, dirt section that we've all been talking about a lot. But it's like, that was like a solid, like, you are not skiing this section. So it was like almost relaxing to be like, okay, the skis are going on the backpack and I'm putting my shoes on and I'm walking this whole section. Whereas like the tougher parts were like when the skis were off and on, like when it was like borderline skiable, but then like you didn't want to totally switch to walk mode, just in case there was skiable sections. So yeah, it was that first kind of into Butterfly Lake into the river was pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that you did have shoes for the tussock part. Because I think Tracy Curry didn't. She just had her ski boots. And I can't imagine walking that far in ski boots. That sounds just miserable. I mean, even on foot, even in normal shoes, sounds miserable to me. Spoken like a
Yes.
biker, but
Yeah, I got like some pretty lightweight, like yeah, they were basically just trail runners. And my feet were really happy to switch out of the ski boots and put, the runners on. You know, it meant I was carrying a little bit more weight, you know, like Tracy would have been just carrying her skis and not that like kind of extra, you know, I bet my boots are like 3 pounds, like, you know, like together.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that does make a little bit of a difference. But yeah, just the foot relief to change footwear. And then, you know, changing back out of my shoes, it was actually like a relief to put my ski boots back on because they have some more ankle support, because I kind of rolled my ankle a little bit on the tussocks. Yeah, my ankle was swollen in Nikolai, which like I could feel that it was sore, but then like visually I was like, oh yeah, I definitely rolled it. So my ski boots gave me like a little bit of ankle support, which was nice to like, it was nice to switch back and forth between footwear.
Yeah.
I'll say that. Yeah.
With so much double polling at the beginning and end of the race, like did you find that you just got like super sore in the muscles that you need for that? Like did that get like exhausting to do that so much?
Yeah, I definitely got some like not both elbows, but like some elbow kind of pain on my right elbow from the double polling. And also like some like upper back kind of like just like tense muscles. You know, from double polling, but also from carrying the backpack. Yeah, you know, the double polling at the end of the race was actually like really easy because it was straight ice. Like, it was almost more, it was more like ice skating, you know, with stabilizer muscles. But yeah, the glide was a lot better on the straight ice than it was. I actually didn't do a whole lot of double polling on the Yentna. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It probably would have been a little bit faster if I had taken, because I had skins on the bottom, just grip zone skins on the bottom. And I hadn't done a whole lot of training with my backpack and the skis together. So I think I didn't realize how much resistance I had with the skins on the bottom. So I actually did do quite a bit of like traditional classic skiing on the Yentna instead of double polling. But I trained as I went and I learned as I went. And by the end of the race, I was like, oh, okay. These are the system, like, and like I got my backpack packed the way that, you know, I should have been doing at the very beginning. But anyway, I feel like I kind of winged it, even though I had planned stuff in my head. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that you had skins for your skis. So they were classic skis, right?
Yeah.
Not skate skis.
Yeah.
And so were they like skin skis or like skins that you could take off?
I could take them off, yeah.
Okay.
But they basically were like just in the grip zone, like so just underneath your foot. So they started kind of like above my toe, under like on the bottom of the ski, like at the toe, and then kind of ended like kind of around the like heel area. So you could take them off and on. I left them on for most of the race until the last couple of days, and then I was doing a bit more like taking them off and putting them on, and then I actually ended up breaking one and did the last 50. So the last 80. No, I'm in kilometer. I've tried to switch between like miles and kilometers. Basically like the last 100 kilometers or 70 kilometers was with one skin. And I didn't have any grip wax with me, so a couple of things that I would change, like if I were to do this again, I would either bring 2 sets of skins, because I only had the 1 set that were on my skis. And then I would also bring like maybe 2 different like grip waxes and a cork, just in case I did need to use grip wax instead of the skins. So yeah.
So how did you ski with only skins on one? Like
So it was a lot of double polling, and then I did a lot of like kick glide.
Like kick double pole.
Yeah, so I double pull and I'd kick with my right ski, which I had the skin on, and then I would glide with my left one. So yeah, that kind of like the like classic double polling with the kick on the skin.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, skiers will understand what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. And then were you always planning to bring a backpack, or was it the like tussocks and no snow in that section that you decided to bring a backpack instead of a sled?
Yeah, that is a good question because I did bring a sled to Alaska with me because I drove in my truck. So I
Mm-hmm.
had some room to like bring stuff up until the last minute. But I was hoping to get everything in the backpack. Like that was sort of my like number one game plan.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get this backpack in my possession until like a week before the race.
Oh gosh.
My backpack was new. My ski boots were relatively new. My skis were brand new. Now they're very scratched and not
Mm-hmm.
brand new. After
Yeah.
6.5 days, they're like it looks like I've had them for 2 years. Um, and what else? My backpack, ski boots, skis. My shoes were actually new as well.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was kind of new, like hardware wise, everything was kind of new except for my poles, which I've had for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I did like a bunch of classic, like, don't do this right before the race, which is get a bunch of new things.
Yeah.
But I like generally have pretty good feet with like whatever I put them in. And like, yeah, I like to think that I like think about things enough that I can like make them work for me with
Mm-hmm.
the power of the brain. Um, so once I got the backpack and like put the essentials in there, I was like, well, it's pretty tight. Like the -40 bag takes up like so
Mm-hmm.
much room. And it's amazing because like I thought that the bike was like, I couldn't, it felt like the bike made me sort of have to like pick and choose what to bring. And now after skiing with a backpack, I'm like, oh, the bike feels like you actually have like kind of more room
Yeah.
than the pack. Um, but then what really increased my confidence with it was, in the last couple of days, looking at the weather forecast and seeing that it was really going to be pretty mild.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look like it was going to be more, in Celsius, more than like kind of minus 20 or so, which I think one night might have been -23, which I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit.
Maybe like 10 below or something.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely, it was frosty and it was cold, but it wasn't like scary cold. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ever feel that like kind of cold fear, like the bit of panic.
Yeah.
So knowing that I didn't have to bring I brought a lighter down jacket than I would normally bring with me. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually like kind of weird to leave behind a few things where I'm like, oh, I always take these things, like, but I wouldn't have used them. So I'm really glad. Like I did bring my down pants, but I didn't touch them.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with a lighter down jacket, and I did bring my -40 bag, but it's because I either have -40 or like a more of like a summer, maybe -7
Mm-hmm.
Celsius bag. So that wouldn't have been warm enough for me, or I just wouldn't have been comfortable with a lighter bag like that. I think a couple people did bring lighter bags, and I did talk to a couple people who had some pretty like cold or like uncomfortable sleeps. So
Mm-hmm.
I maybe would have brought a -30 bag if I'd had one. But yeah, so once I could get everything in my backpack, then I was like, okay, I can do just the backpack. But I would say I still had the biggest backpack out of everybody who had packs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just like sometimes I just can't, get rid of stuff.
Yeah. Did you ever weigh it?
I didn't weigh it.
Yeah.
I thought about asking the airport in McGrath to because I did put it on the scale there to see what
Uh-huh.
it weighed, but I didn't have any food in it, and I dumped my fuel, and I didn't have my water in it. So I was like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter now. But I
Yeah.
would say it was like between, my best guess would be that it was like 40 pounds maybe, which is like
Mm,
kind of heavy. Like,
yeah.
you know, I know that you're a geologist, and I don't know exactly what your like summer or what your like field work or what that
Uh-huh.
sort of, that's kind of what, but that was one thing that I wanted to ask you about what you did.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I do carry a pack around in the summer, and it's like super heavy, like, like 50 pounds sometimes by the end of the day or more. So yeah, I have trained with a backpack in the past, but I hadn't carried a backpack since September. So, even like 40 pounds, I was like, for that many days in a row, it's like on skis and yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that changed the flex of your skis? I mean, you said like maybe you had like that the skins were like really
Totally.
grippy. You know, it's
Yeah.
because of all the extra weight
Yeah.
compared
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think so. I think I just have like a couple more gear questions. Like, I think that's such an interesting tip um, to what do you say, sharpen the tips of ski poles. I've never heard of that for ice, but
Yeah.
great idea.
Totally.
Really cool. And then did you do like glide wax? Like, did you have like liquid wax that you put on at any point, or did you just
I did.
not?
I had brought some to Alaska with me, and I did put some on, to like freshen it up, like before the race started. But I
Yeah.
honestly looked at the tube of glide wax, and I looked at my backpack, and I'm like, I like really don't want to carry, anything even like a little bit extra. So I decided to leave the glide wax, like the dabbable glide wax, behind. And it was funny, in the first day of the race, like we started getting into the icy patches, and the skiers were putting their skis on and skiing and like, double poling across a bunch of the ice. And I knew that we still had like, a mile or two of like gravel road to walk to get to Big Lake. And so mentally I was like, well, I'm just going to carry my skis until Big Lake and then put them on there. And part of my thinking was like, I didn't want to like wear all of the glide wax off on the bottom of my skis. And then it was like, as soon as you put your skis on, it was like, oh, it's all going to come off. And like, there isn't going to be anything on there for the whole time. Like, yeah. So, if I like, would I choose to bring it the next time? I honestly, I don't know. Yeah. But kick wax for sure.
Yeah. And okay, I lied. I do have more ski questions. Did they have like, because Tracy said that she had metal edges on hers. I'm wondering if you had metal edges on yours, and if they were like, just kind of like what the skis were like, if they were like a narrower ski or like a wider backcountry ski. And same with the boots, if they were like normal racing boots or if they were like warmer backcountry boots or something.
Yeah, so the skis were our Mad Shoe, that's the brand, and so I spent some time trying to figure out which skis that I wanted, because I've had, the pair that I had from the past, like they definitely were not going to be the right ones for this race, and they were, beat up anyway. So I went for, it was advertised as like the lightest backcountry, like metal edged, kind of like, classic ski that you could get. And so I went for the metal edge. Doesn't go like all the way from tip to tail. Like it starts like kind of, I don't know, maybe like 3/4 back from the tips. And they are relatively narrow compared to what you can get. So I think they were definitely on like the lighter end of this, that sort of ski that you can get. And then my boots were sort of like mid, I guess I would call them like mid weight. They definitely weren't racing boots. I noticed that Tracy was wearing the Alpina, sort of like, I have a pair of those as well. They're sort of my like -40. Like those would be the boots that I would have brought if it was looking like it was going to be really cold. So I sort of went with the medium weight ones just because I thought I would sweat in them a little bit less, and and for carrying them they would be a little bit less heavy. But she wore them, so she didn't have to carry them. And then I also have like a pair of ski boot covers. They're like fleece with like a nylon outer. I've had those for like 10 years. And they honestly are like one of the best pieces. There's like a few kind of like key pieces of equipment that I just really love and bring all the time on all of these things. And that is one thing that I like almost never leave behind, because it just makes such a difference. If it's windy or it does get really cold, then I can just put the boot covers on, and I like, they fit over my biking boots as well. They fit over running shoes, hiking boots. Like they just like go over anything that, just to like cut the wind and a little bit of insulation. So yeah, that was sort of my ski and boot system.
And do you use pogies on your poles, or just like mittens?
I did use pogies on my poles this year, kind of for the first time ever. Like, I've done a few foot winter ultras and a ski one as well in 2019. And pogies actually would have made a huge difference in my 2019. This was before I'd started biking, so I didn't really know about them. And because I really did struggle back then with like, keeping my hands warm with the poling, like, because, when you're walking, you can kind of stow your poles away and like swing your arms around. But like with skiing, you do need to, use the poles. So I wore like either bare hands or very thin gloves, like pretty much the whole ITI this year with pogies. They're my biking pogies, so they're big. I think, if I did this again, I would invest in or make, or, find somebody who's making the like kind of smaller pole specific design pogies. But yeah, I did really, they were annoying sometimes when they were too warm. But they're pretty light, and yeah, I did like having them.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
The cold hands, like that's why I don't cross country ski much anymore. Because I just hate having cold hands, and I feel like biking, you always have pogies on them, and so like it's easy to regulate the temperature of my hands. Whereas like skiing, like for the first like 10-15 minutes, I feel like they're just so cold. I hate it.
Yeah, and like with the biking, you can kind of have them in your pogies and like scrunch them up and like kind of like, you can do things like while you're biking in there. Yeah, there's definitely, there's so many pros and cons to like each mode. Like
well, maybe we could segue into that. Like so having done the ITI all three ways, like what are the pros and cons, and what have you liked, about each mode, I guess?
It's a good question. So I mean, when the biking is good, it's like the best. Really, like, if I could have my choice, I would have skied last year and biked this year, because the biking this year was it looked like so much fun. Like, how did you feel like watching the bikers this year? Like, did you feel like you wanted to be out there because it was like so fast?
It was a little bit, and yes, and like the build up to the race, there was so much like discussion and drama about, like the open water, like potential for like open water going back like a month ago, and then no snow, and the Iditarod mushers like discussing like whether they were going to change their route. So I feel like there was so much concern about the conditions, and then what you all got in the race like was kind of like the best, like at least for biking, like the best possible conditions, at least in the first, like except for the tussocks, like like awesome, amazing conditions. And so I was like just so wanting, like that's not fair, like because I was up there the last 2 years, and 2016 the conditions were actually pretty similar to what they were like this year, and like we had like bare ice up to Squentna. And it was just like super fast and awesome. But the last 2 years have been so slow and soft and cold. And so I was like, I had like 2 hard years the last 2 years. And like now it's like a really fast, great year. And like I'm missing out on that. And I was sad to not be able to have those conditions. So
totally. Yeah. Last year was definitely a tough bike. It was, I mean, my biking time was 6 days and 4 hours, and my ski time this year was 6 days and 12 hours. So it's like, that's pretty close to each other. Like, really. And yeah, so I think skiing last year actually would have been, you know, pretty good. And then biking this year obviously would have been great. I did find, yeah, it could have been a lot worse, really. This, like, all of that ice could have been overflow or soft
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, water. Like, I had one water crossing, and, you know, I want to say that this is a pro of the skis for this year, but it was like literally, you know, one water crossing. It was like knee deep, and probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 steps across. I think there's been like a couple videos posted of some bikers crossing it at the top of the Dalzell Creek, not like the gorge, but where the kind of like creek proper starts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at that point, I took my skis off and looked at the water crossing, and I had to actually break like the shelf ice on either side in order to like get down into the water and then up on the other side. So like even like walking across it, like it was like there was like different layers of ice in it. So like you could easily like trip over it if you didn't like kind of step up and like break it.
Yeah.
And I had a moment where I was like, oh, this is way easier than like carrying a bike across this. And then, but you know, it was over in a couple of minutes. So whether that would be like a pro to skiing or not, I don't know if I would put it in that category. But I definitely think that, at least from my perspective, skiing is like always better than being on foot. Because if you have runners, then anything that you need to walk, you can walk, and anything that you can ski. And then you get these like micro breaks on like any kind of downhill. Like, I just find it's a little bit less impactful on the body to ski. So I definitely did my share of like foot ultras. Like, I did 2018 was my foot ultra in the ITI. And it was I would call it a very easy year, my first one. So I was like lulled into this false sense of like, maybe it's not that bad, you know, because like I had a great rainy pass day in 2018. The weather wasn't too cold. The snow cover was like 100% like from start to finish. Like, there was no water. There was no open water. There was no glare ice. There was fresh snow. So like I did have to deal with, you know, walking in some fresh snow in 2018. But there was no huge challenge, like huge obstacle. Like, there wasn't like a single obstacle to like kind of overcome. It was more just like the distance, and there was wind. There was some pretty serious like wind for like 24 hours, but it wasn't cold. So it was like goggles on, and it was just like the noise kind of drove you nuts.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And then last year, like, you know, you were there last year,
Yeah.
along with like a bunch of us, and it was like, it was tough.
Yeah.
You know, the wind was crazy. It got really cold. Like, you know, on the way into Bear Creek Cabin, it was like -40. I was traveling with a guy named Ben who was volunteering this year, but last year he did the 1000 on his bike. And yeah, like it took all night to get into Bear Creek Cabin. You know, and the trail was kind of like awful. And I remember like one of the skiers going by me on the way up Rainy Pass, and I was like, he's got the like right mode this year.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know, it, you know, the mode depends on the year, and you just never know. Yeah, so, but it could have been worse this year. I kept telling myself that. It's like, you know, it is really hard, and the trail isn't ideal, but it could be a lot worse.
So I don't know if you want to go back and do the 350 again, or if you feel like, you know, I'm in the triple threat club, like I did it.
Yeah, I do feel like I do not want to do the 350 again. You know, if I did go for the 1000 mile one year, then obviously I would have to like redo the 350 mile part at the beginning. But yeah, I definitely, you know, you get to McGrath and you're like, you know, or even like at some points during the race, you're like, I always say this, I never want to do it again. But that feeling like does fade really quickly,
Uh-huh.
shockingly quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'll sign up for the 350 again, but I would definitely volunteer. And you know, I didn't do well, actually, no, my goal, even in like the very first thing I signed up for, was the 1000 in 2018. I like emailed the race director, who was not Kyle and Cynthia. It was
Katie Merchant.
yeah. And I was like, can I sign up for the 1000? And she's like, no.
Love it.
I was like, oh, okay. Because it's like, well, I'm coming all the way over there, and like, you know, I will always choose the longer distance if it, you know, out of any of them. But yeah, so I would say from the very beginning, like, I did have the 1000 as my goal. But after the 350 last year, with how, you know, challenging it was, like the rainy pass and that whole 24 hours was a lot to like process and think about. So I was like, oh, I'm never doing this again, and I don't want to do the 1000, like, ugh. But then I finished it on the bike, and I was like, well, now I have to do it on the skis. So like that goal, that like triple threat goal, kind of like, I didn't start out like that, but it definitely took over the 1000 goal, at least for this year. Cause I was like, well, I could sign up for the 1000 this year, or I could do it on skis and get this other, you know, different goal done.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because I was wondering, like, hypothetically, if you were to do it again, it's more of a question of like just comparing the different modes as to whether you would like choose a mode in advance, and if so, which one, or would you wait to see what the conditions were and then pick?
That is something that I have not thought about, but yes, hypothetically, if I were to sign up and drive to Alaska, I would 100% choose my mode like a couple of days beforehand, because what I've also learned is that I can wing it. Like, even if I haven't trained on the skis, I can painfully do it. So yeah, I think it would be kind of cool to be like, oh, I have like all these different, well, honestly, it would be between bike or ski. I would be like, am I going to bike or ski it? And shoot it, you know, a couple days. And if it had been this year, I would have 100% biked it.
Yeah.
But it's funny because, you know, there were people that were done in, you know, like Leah was done in like 2, which is amazing. She was done in like 2 days, or whatever her like official time was. I can't remember. 2 days, 11 hours maybe. And like, honestly, that's like it's over too soon. Like, you know, like, you spent all this time, and like, at least for me, like, I felt like being on, you know, on my skis this year, like 6.5 days is like you know, that's like a good holiday. That's like, you know, it's not over too soon. And you know, I'm not chasing cutoffs or anything. So I felt like I got my money's worth out of it.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, maybe the biking would have been, well, maybe I would have just like hung out at checkpoints for longer, but yeah. So,
you know, I have to say, I was talking to my mom, who's like seen me do the 1000 the last 2 years. And like, I think that anyway, so we were talking about the 350 and how fast it was. And her comment was, she's like, it barely seems worth it to go all the way up to Alaska to do just 350 miles and do it that fast. And I was like, yeah, you try going into McGrath and telling that to the other racers. Like, they just did a lot.
Yeah.
Like, in the scheme of things, compared to everything else in the world, like, that's a lot.
Yes. I think sometimes like, if you're in this, like, you know, small world of people that do this, or even if you're associated with it, like, I think people start to like see the distances as like smaller than they are.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare the like 300 to the 1000. It's like, yeah, you know, it is quite a bit shorter visually, especially on the screen. But it's still a long way to, you know, like, I did 75 kilometers a day almost, like, you know, it's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what did you think would be easy but was hard? And what did you think would be hard but was easy?
Um, yeah, I feel like my answer is going to be similar to a lot of people, which was Rainy Pass. It's not that I like thought it would be hard because in 2018 I went up and over it with no problems with great weather on foot. So I knew that it like could be easier than it was. But last year, just like, I just had this, like, now my memory of it is like pushing my bike up and over like waist height, like wind drifts in however many miles an hour wind that was. Like, it would last year felt pretty wild up there. Like,
That was intense.
it was super intense.
Yeah.
And like I left I left Pantilla Lodge like kind of on my own in the morning, like 7 a.m., like thinking that, there was this huge group of people in the lodge or like in the bunkhouse, and I was like, okay, all these people are going to be behind me, as like, it's like setting out by yourself is one thing, but like knowing that there's going to be like some people behind you is sort of like comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there was a couple people in front of me, but they were, I wasn't going to catch up with them by any means. And then like that, whatever it was, like 18-mile push, like literally got blown over by the wind and was like underneath my bike in like the waist deep powder, like getting back up. And anyway, I didn't like, yeah, it was a wild night. So I had that kind of like in my head, like what it could be. So I left Pantilla at like 1 a.m. That night.
Wow.
And it was definitely like chilly. That was like one of the like colder mornings.
Mm-hmm.
So like had to cover the face and definitely, like warmed my hands up a few times, or like made sure that like they stayed warm, or like warmed them up if they felt cold. But it was actually like quite a nice ski all the way around. I call that like a big corner. Like, it's, like you leave Pantilla and it's just like this big, huge corner around to Rainy Pass.
Yeah.
Um, and there was literally northern lights from like the second that I started at 1 a.m. until like minutes before the sun rose.
Wow.
Just like
Wonderful.
continuous. And they were dancing, and like it was really, really nice. And then I was on the pass. It felt like getting to the pass felt really easy. Like, I was like, oh, like, I'm on like the Rainy Pass Lake already. And then I was like at the pass summit like at 9 a.m., which was like perfect. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was really, really happy with my timing. And then I got to do the gorge in like, with lots of daylight time, and just sort of like slid down the other side and took my skis off a few times for some steeper hills that were a little bit intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I would say that day and that whole section from Pantilla to Roan was unexpectedly type 1 fun, pleasant.
Yeah.
And I
Awesome.
got to Roan at like I think it was like 1 p.m. or something like that. I think I got there like kind of within 12-ish hours of leaving Pantilla. So I was super happy with that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, I definitely, I didn't, I, yeah, it was just fun. And then, what was, should have been, well, I guess I really don't like that. I've heard a couple people say this, but I don't love the section from Happy Step, basically from the top of Happy Steps to Pantilla. I find
Mm.
that a really, really tough section, especially the last, like, I don't know, I would call it like the last like 10 or 15 miles into Pantilla. Maybe the last 10 miles. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like an open, meadowy area, and then back into the forest. And then some of it's downhill, but then you also go uphill.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's kind of climby.
it is kind of climby. It's like
Yeah.
more so than expected. And
Mm-hmm.
it it's kind of the most like repetitive, alternating, similar terrain patches,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like that whole way in. And I was experiencing, I guess, like what I wasn't expecting to be hard was like how much body pain I cycled through.
Mm-hmm.
And so on that section, I was having like really, really bad heel pain, like on both heels.
Ooh,
And it wasn't blisters. Like I didn't have any blisters for the whole race, even in ski boots, like,
that's
which
great.
is pretty wild.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, even with like the warm temperatures and sweaty and like all that kind of stuff. But I think some of it was from wearing the backpack, which I wasn't used to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
since the summertime. And also like the ground was like hard packed, you know, like hard packed snow, hard packed ice. Like I think the, you know, the impact definitely came into play, and new ski boots, you know, like I think, you know, the ski boot heel material, or like, you know, it just might not have been a great fit. But anyway, I had really bad heel pain coming into Pentilla. And I think this was a combination of the pain and just the mental pain of like coming in there. But I cried for like an hour, like
Oh.
while I was moving.
Hmm.
Like literal like tears were like coming and like dry. I was just like, I was feeling so sorry for myself.
Yeah.
And I just wanted it to be over. And also, like, I knew how good the bunkhouse was in Pentilla, and I just wanted to get there and get into one of those beds with like the flannel, like fuzzy,
Yeah.
you know, like it's like with like the wall of like noodle soups and like oatmeal and like,
Yeah.
you know, I just like I wanted everything that was there so bad. And so that combined with the pain, like I think I was like unexpectedly low. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I wasn't expecting to cry in this race.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's my answer to the unexpectedly hard and unexpectedly easy
Yeah. But
times.
that's great then that that was followed by the next
The
day going
best day.
over the past.
Yeah.
Past. That's great.
Yeah. And then, you know, I got to Roan and oh, okay. So here's another answer for this, because I think this one actually might be more better than, well, no, maybe it's tied with like the Great Rainy Pass Day. Every single checkpoint that I arrived at, including Butterfly Lake, in Roan, Finger Lake, like every single checkpoint, I was there either alone for however long I was there, or with like one other person who was like just leaving or like just coming in when I
Hmm.
was leaving. And even Pentilla, like Pentilla was full when I left, but it wasn't a hive of like activity or energy. Like I would say like every checkpoint experience was really calm and really pleasant. Like it was amazing. So that was like a huge highlight for me, even though I was like, I certainly wasn't at the front and I also wasn't at the back, because I've had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
experience at the back of races where like you get things to yourself because you're, you know, you're the back runner. But yeah, I was just in like this bubble in the middle of the race where like I felt very alone while I was traveling. And like at checkpoint, you know, I had really good like human experiences, but it was really calm. It was nice.
Yeah.
To
That's
get like
good.
Roan to yourself and Finger Lake to yourself is like pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when, I don't know, I don't remember exactly when you were at Puntilla last year, if it was the same night that I was there, but like there were so many people and like Faye and Jeff arrived and I heard them whispering, like, you know, but all the beds were full, you know, people on foot were starting to come in and like trying to figure out if they should like go bivvy outside or like what they were going to do. Or, and so I went and I talked to them. I was like, hey, like all of us are getting like 2/3 of us are getting up in like 45 minutes. So we're going to
Yeah.
be out of here soon. So just like, just wait a second. You'll
Hang out
get a
on the
bed.
hang out on the velvet black couch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
No,
can be hard when it's like full and you're like, I'm not going outside. It's too cold out there.
totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, it was not like that. What was it like when I was there last year? I got in really late and I left pretty early. I think I was only there for maybe 6 hours or something like that. Whereas like I was there for 14 this year. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was so nice.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, no, it definitely wasn't that busy.
Mm-hmm. Great. Can you talk about the winter that you had? So like the Yukon Arctic Ultra and if you got to like train on skis much. Kind of like the lead up this winter to the ITI.
Yeah. Definitely could have done more specific training this winter. I did do a lot outside this winter. A lot of snowshoeing actually, and quite a bit of skiing, like cross country skiing, but um, it was focused on other things, which I in January, mid-January, I, with some help with Yukon Tourism, a lot of help from Yukon Tourism, pulled off a fat bike event in Dawson City. Just a short, around town. We did like 13 miles of like river trail and single track trail. And I spent most of the winter snowshoe packing and pulling a sled full of wood for weight on these trails, like to fat bike groom, because the city, I don't have a snow dog like a packer, and the city didn't, which they do now.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting for next winter.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Yeah.
But I put a lot of time and energy into grooming these trails for the fat bike event. So a lot of my like winter was focused on that and getting the event, doing it and pulling it off. We had 24 bikers. Half of them were women, which was sweet. And like a handful of them were first time fat bikers, like ever. They just like, we had a bunch of rental bikes that we brought up. And so that was super cool, but obviously took up a lot of like mental space and physical time and energy. So did that. And then from there, I sort of like the week after that, I went to Whitehorse and was there for 5 or 6 days before the Yukon Arctic Ultra started, because I helped do, like, I run the training camp for that race. It's similar to what the ITI does with their training camp. It's the same kind of thing. It's before the race starts, and I had 6 people in it this year. So did that, and then could focus on the Yukon Ultra, which I did this year on a bike. So that race was 600 kilometers. So that's 375 miles. Miles, people. That race it was a new route this year. And for anybody who doesn't know much about the Yukon Ultra, the traditional route goes from Whitehorse to Dawson City, which is 430 miles. And then the same as the ITI, long distance, and then the medium distance is 300 miles, and then they have a shorter distance of 100 miles. But this year everything changed. So with the Yukon Ultra, I've also done that race foot, bike, ski.
Oh wow!
So I did foot, ski, bike. So I did the bike in 2023 and like got the all 3 modes done there. So there was only one other guy who has done that, but one guy who has done that before. So I was the first woman to do that.
Yeah, awesome.
So I was done with that race, and I was like, I volunteered the next year, and so that was sort of what I was thinking that I would do, from then on, like in subsequent years. But then they changed the route, so I was like, well, now I want to do the new route.
Yeah.
So, and I had already signed up for the ITI. I knew that I was doing that, but then I was like, well, maybe this will be good training for the 1,000 mile eventually, just to like see what. So the whole idea behind it was just to like see how I did with like that amount of like that number of kilometers within the space of a month. Like, it was two different events, but it was still, back to back. And I just like thought it'd be interesting to see what it was like to do 2 different ones. And I didn't want to ski, like I wanted to bike because I really love my bike. Although I think skiing the Yukon Ultra this year would have actually been it might have been challenging with the temperatures, but it definitely would have been better conditions wise. Like the snow was great, slow because it's cold, but there was lots of snow, and it was also a lot of climbing, like a lot of rolling hills. It was all rolling hills. It was like up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down. Like there was no real flat sections. Like it was literally climbing and descending. So with a bike, as you know, it's like, especially in those temperatures, which it was like minus 30 to 40 Celsius the entire time, out a break. Like there was no there was no relief from the cold. Like it was very, very stressful.
Yeah.
6 people out of 46 starters finished.
Wow.
So it was pretty tough on a lot of people, you know, for a number of reasons, but the main one being the cold. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really was pretty serious this year. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So, you know, like with going up hills with the bike, like it's either you pedal and you get really hot and exhaust yourself, or you push. So I found, especially in the cold, like I find it a lot easier to regulate my body temperature by pushing the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can kind of slow down or whatever, like move your hands around and like warm them back up. And it also warms your feet up. But it was literally just like pushing up a hill, getting to the top of it, hauling yourself back on the bike, you know, pedaling downhill because it's cold and slow. Some of it was coasting, but and then you also have the like wind chill factor. So it's like
Yeah.
your layers were like kind of always like kind of weird, and it was just really exhausting to like get on and off the bike that much and to not really have that. You never got a flow for
Mm-hmm.
for riding. So it was, yeah, it was an interesting race. It was super hard, and I was also sick. I got a really bad like chest cough, like really bad cough, like the first, you know, the morning after the start, like, you know, so like one day into the race. And then it would like, I spent 28 hours mid race. Like I was intending to ride like 100 kilometers a day. So like, you know, 60
Mm-hmm.
ish miles a day. I was like, okay, like I think I can do that, you know, if the conditions are right. But it took 22 hours to do the first 100 kilometers. So I was like, oh, that goal is going,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you know, because I was including that with rest. Like, you know, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, like rest and 100K within 24 hours and then repeat,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I was like, oh, like, you know, maybe I could be done in like 6 days or like whatever. That was my goal in the beginning. It
Mm-hmm.
ended up being 9 days. And yeah, I did have a 28-hour recovery mid race, basically at the checkpoint, halfway check, like the midpoint checkpoint, where we could go inside and sleep. So I recovered, kind of recovered. I recovered enough to continue there, but I
Mm-hmm.
did have a cough for the entire race, which was worrying. But you know, I wasn't coughing up blood, and I was able to breathe. Like, it really sucked, but like I couldn't confidently quit.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, well, like I probably should, but and like I definitely like considered it. Like I really, really was the closest to quitting something, um, you know, that I think that I've been.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up continuing and did get it finished. So but I was 3 days more than I'd been like mentally planning on. So then that like took up that like recovery time between the Yukon Ultra and the ITI. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, like, you know, I think I ended up with 11 days in between, which, you know, by the time I was starting the ITI, like my cough had been a lot, like I went to the medical clinic here to get it checked out, and they said my lungs sounded totally fine, and they checked my like oxygen level and everything was totally fine. So that like increased my confidence to, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to continue with my plans to go to Alaska. And yeah, I think by the time I started the ITI, I really did feel, I probably wasn't like totally recovered, you know, by like a um whatever, like I felt fine though. Like I didn't feel like I still needed more sleep, or like nothing was, I you know, I finished the Yukon Ultra on the bike, and like my body didn't feel wrecked. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's because, you know, the speed was not very fast. For all the reasons, like the cold and the sickness and like that sort of thing. And yeah, so it was mentally challenging because of the cold. But I didn't feel like it wrecked my body. So in that way, like I felt like I was, you know, more ready for the ITI than I thought I would be. And then as for like training on the skis, I like honestly got the backpack a week before the race and crammed all my stuff in there and was like, okay, I think this is gonna work. I did a 2-hour ski with my backpack, like
Uh-huh. Wow.
Out like on the place that I like to take the dogs here for walks, and so I went and skied there with a friend for 2 hours, and I was like, okay, and then I got to Anchorage and there's no snow there, so I didn't even ski. Like I went for a run, which was I got like new running shoes, and I was like, yay. I got to go try these out, and they felt really great. So I was like, oh, I could run, even though I haven't run I can't even I've probably run like a handful of times in the last year, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and ran like 6 miles and probably walked, 4 kind of, and then my like quads and butt were sore the next day, which was like the day before the race started. So I actually started the race on skis with like a really sore quad muscle, I think from running.
Oh gosh.
So, I'm and obviously I did the 600 kilometers on the bike. So like I'm fit and like my lifestyle is, trends towards like really active stuff. But as far as like focused ski training with the backpack, it was like super minimal. Which, if I had a different kind of winter, I would have liked to have done more of the like focused ski training, but it was what it was, and it ended up fine. So
yeah. Wow, amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I probably would have hurt a little bit less if I had done more specific training.
Yeah, but I like it. Interesting to think about, like kind of like training by like snowshoeing, pulling a sled. Like I'm sure that helped. And you said you play hockey. You've been playing hockey the last few days.
Yeah.
So cross training.
Yeah. I play on 2 hockey teams here in Dawson, so I play hockey 4 nights a week. Which also like eats into training, like other training time as well. Even though my method kind of has always just been like time on my feet, no matter what the thing is. So yeah, it's working so far.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about these kinds of events that draws you to them?
I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I really enjoy other people's answers to this. And sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really good answer. I feel like that, I don't know. Yeah. I do think about this a lot. I'm like, why am I doing this again? Like, especially on day one, I'm always like, why am I choosing to do this kind, like I call it a holiday. Like it really is like what I'm choosing to do for like my vacation time, instead of like, a hot holiday or like, that kind of style of things. But like I think these events, at least like since I've been doing them, there's nowhere to like hide from mistakes and like weaknesses, and I feel I have a hard time like figuring out how to say this, but it kind of like it kind of like shows you who you are in a lot of like different scenarios, and I really enjoy that side of things. I also really enjoy that like a lot of what I come out with at the end of them is like the people connections kind of mean a lot to me. So it's like I feel like we're all kind of out there because we like being on our own, and like, that kind of, but it's also kind of like organized, like, you're not totally on your own because, we're being tracked, and like, that kind of thing. Like, so there's definitely like an element, of these things that it is kind of about the people almost as much as it is about like the nature, like, being out there. But honestly, I really like movement, and like, and being in like that deep into nature. And everything's just like out there existing the way that it exists, and you're like moving through it, and nothing's against you. Like I think like sometimes in these things, I find, especially with like race type scenarios, like it's easy to fall into that, like, blaming your gear or blaming the environment or like getting like upset with things that you think are like causing problems, but like you can ultimately kind of always bring it back to yourself. And like if you can't do that, then I feel like you're like missing something. So yeah, I think it just like kind of like shows you and yeah, and the environment at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think too, like, I don't know that like people watching this like really understand like the camaraderie that exists amongst racers. I was talking to someone 2 days ago, I think it was Beth Freymiller, and she said like doing events like this is like a team sport, kind of like
Yeah, totally.
getting the energy from the other racers and moral support um and all that. So
Yeah, even if you're not traveling side by side or even like kind of leapfrogging with somebody, because I've found like, I didn't see anybody between Roan and Nikolai. Like,
wow.
yeah. So that's not totally true because I was setting up my bivvy kind of between Roan and Bear Creek, in the forest, totally dry. Like there was no snow. It was like the most amazing. I actually overslept. It was like I meant to sleep 2 hours and I slept for like almost 8.
Wow.
But as I was setting up my bivvy, there was a light coming from the Bear Creek direction, and I was like, "That's like kind of, And this biker like comes up and stops beside me, and I was like, "Are you with the ITI?" And he was like, "No, I'm just like touring the trail from McGrath back home to Anchorage."
Huh.
Um, and he asked me what the trail was like between there and Roan. So we had like, a minute or so conversation, and it was nice that I wasn't sleeping and that I did get to see him. Because it's just cool to know that somebody was doing that. And then the only other biker that I saw, I actually ended up seeing him in McGrath at the end, and he asked me if he went by me. Anyway, he like came up behind me coming from the Roan direction, and I like was kind of in like I was getting tired and I was thinking about bivvying. I originally was thinking about going all the way to Bear Creek, and then I totally kiboshed that plan because I was like it was like 9:30 and I bivvied because I was tired.
Yeah.
But anyway, he went by me and he was like, I think he said hi, and I sort of like did a weird like hi, like he might have been like, "How are you?" And I might have said like fine, even though I was like kind of tired and struggling a little bit, I guess, mentally. But then he just kept going, and I was like, "Oh." he didn't even he didn't even stop to like but I think like the perspective is different on a bike because you're going so much faster. Like I don't know, when you're traveling on, because I was traveling on foot at that point, so I felt extra slow because I was on the dirt in my running shoes, and like it was almost a moment of like, I can't believe you're not gonna like talk to me for a minute.
Yeah.
I got over it quickly, but it was funny when I saw him in McGrath because I was like, "You didn't even talk to me." And he was like, "I'm sorry, I actually felt really bad about that." Because he like sort of paused at the top of a hill, like the next hill that like because he had to push up it. So I like kind of started catching up to him, and I was like, "Oh, yay!" And then he just like took off, and then he was totally gone. And then I didn't see anybody. So those were like my two human interactions between Roan and Nikolai, including a 3-hour sleep or like stay at Bear Creek Cabin, which I also had to myself, which was really nice. But yeah, to go along with this, like, it is it is teamwork, or it's a team sport. Like the volunteers are all part of, like, everybody's part of the team. It's like, you know, it is a team sport. Even if you spent your whole time on the trail alone, you still, had the burgers, had the, went and slept in a bed that somebody made. Like, it's yeah, that side of things. I think there's something about the like combination of the two things, because it's like being out there on your own in like what can be an uncomfortable environment, pushing yourself, but then it's like the flip side of that is like going inside somewhere where somebody's like, getting into Nikolai and having like Ben and Jay and Amber, just, three racers, who are volunteering now, but they know exactly what you want. And like, it's like you come in from that outdoor world, and then you're into this like people and indoors and safe and comfortable and supportive. And like, it's I don't know, there's almost like nothing like that feeling. And I think
Right.
that partly is why I keep coming back to do these things specifically, because of that. It just feels, I don't know, it just feels so good.
Cool. Like that contrast between like the harsh
Yeah.
challenge compared to, yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, kind of like being nurtured and safe and warm, comfortable.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What are your favorite foods to eat on the trail?
I sort of like winged it this year. I do like to like make my own energy balls. I do like a tahini. I really like tahini based anything. Just it does really well like in super cold temperatures.
Hmm.
I think it's like heavier oil based than like other nut butters, because I had peanut butter balls and the tahini balls, and the tahini balls were way better.
Really?
The peanut butter ones were like, in the Yukon Ultra, at least, they were like super hard, like
Hmm.
in any below zero temperature for whatever reason. And the tahini ones were great. So I do really like those. But yeah, I like, I made peanut butter and honey sandwiches for like I think I probably made like 4 or 5 of them for the first couple days. They take up a lot more room than like, the bars and that sort of thing that you can, like the store-bought ones, which I did have a bunch of. But I like holding on to something and like eating it, like
Mm-hmm.
a sandwich or like a wrap. Like I think I had some cheese wraps and then some peanut butter and honey sandwiches. I always like trail mix with like peanut butter M&Ms and like basically anything with like chocolate covered almonds or peanut M&Ms, that sort of thing. One snack that I had this year that I really loved was the candied ginger, which
Oh,
is sort
yeah.
of like a bit of like a wake you up kind of like snack. It's like
Uh-huh.
I really enjoy that on the trail. Um, so yeah, I would say those ones are kind of like my go-to trail snacks.
Mm-hmm.
Chocolate bars, totally like Snickers. I always bring Snickers for like the chocolate bar kind of, and like
Yeah.
it's got to be like an actual chocolate bar. It's like, you can have like chocolate-y kind of like energy bars and stuff, like the chocolate flavor, whatever, but like
Mm-hmm.
nothing really beats like the Three Musketeers or the Snickers or like that, yeah, Mars bar.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never thought to make like energy balls with tahini instead of
Tahini.
peanut butter.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, tahini and then like some seeds or whatever else you want to put in there. But yeah, it's a
Mm-hmm.
great base.
Cool. Yeah, because usually with the peanut butter ones, I get sick of those after a while.
Yeah, and it's funny with the tahini flavor. Like I didn't really get sick of them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. If someone were interested in like starting to do like these winter ultras, I guess what advice would you have for them?
Um, if they're women identifying to join the Wild Winter Women
Yeah.
page for
Uh-huh.
a bunch of information.
Yeah.
Basically like read like I before the ITI I read all of Jill Homer's books.
Mm-hmm.
And like actually that is I read her 1,000 Mile, now I can't remember what it's called.
North Wind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about her 1,000 mile bike ride, and that was what put the ITI seed like in my brain. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, and before the Yukon Ultra, I read like Mark Hines's book that he wrote about his experience on it. I probably read it twice, and then again afterwards because I wanted to compare like my thoughts about it to his. Same with Jill Homer's. Like I reread hers again afterwards. So yeah, I think like reading some, firsthand accounts and talking to people about kind of advice. But I mean, the main key with all of this is like it has to be like you who wants to do it, like not like your friend wants you to like come and do it with them, or like it sounds like, I don't know, you have to like really really want to do it. And then it just makes it gathering all the information like kind of more fun rather than like a chore, like yeah. So
Actually, can I step away for a second? I recently, like, or maybe it was this morning, I decided to get all of my like Iditarod Trail Invitational or Iditarod like books like into one pile. So I can go grab them and be right back.
yeah.
Just a second. Okay. So the one you're just talking about is Jill Homer's
Yeah.
Into the North Wind.
Yeah.
So that what she wrote this after her 2016 race to Nome 1,000-mile ITI, which, you know, she set the course record that year. And I think it's so cool to have like that, like,
Yeah, and it's still
race
standing.
documented.
As far as I know, she's still got the record.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And, you know, I haven't looked recently how the two women in the 1,000-mile race are doing compared to it.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
a couple days ago they were really close to it.
Okay.
And what I said was like at the time, like if they have good conditions and maybe if they can like, I think at that point they were like 1 day behind Jill Homer's record. I was like, if they have good conditions, they've definitely got a crack at it.
Wow. It's so impressive that, yeah, I love that book, The North Wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's one that I have, which I'm borrowing from Beth Freymiller.
I was going to ask if have you started it?
No.
Oh my God. My friend Jillian, who finished the 350 on a bike this year. So the two of us traveled to Alaska together. She lives in Whitehorse. And anyway, we've been friends because of like this winter ultra stuff for several years now. And so we drove convoy, 2 different vehicles. But anyway, a few months ago, she loaned me that book, and it's wild. It's like fact. It's like real. It's kind of like fiction, but it's also got like some nonfiction in it. Like it's like it's a trip. It's
funny.
Yeah.
And then Grant.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Freezing Hot.
Yeah. Mon.
Yeah, and he did that 1,000-mile a few years ago. I forget what year that's set. And then I have like one. Libby Riddle's Race Across Alaska. She was the first woman to win the Iditarod.
Oh yeah.
And that was back in the 80s. And it's fun to read because I mean there's just so many things that haven't changed. Like, you know, like the dominant wind patterns, you know, on the coast, for example. So there's that. So she was mushing, not biking or skiing or running. And then I also have just like Iditarod, just about the dog sled race, like history of the race, history of the trail, the Sarum Run, and then the Cruelest Miles, which is about the Sarum Run in 1925.
I read that one. That was a good one.
Yeah.
One of the ones I read most recently was a veterinarian's book on his role in the Iditarod sled dog race. I think it's called 4,000 Paws or something. It was a really good one to read, just from like the vet standpoint. And basically the way that he did it was like each chapter was like one of the checkpoints. It wasn't necessarily like the same year, but it was like events that happened at that checkpoint, kind of all the way along. But
cool.
Yeah, there's some really good. I'll have to put some of those ones on my list if I end up going for the 1,001 year, because you know what you said about like the wind patterns and like just like that stretch of trail, like, you know, traveling over like sea ice and being in, you know, like that kind of like exposure wind wise. Like I don't have like, you know, I'm in the Yukon, we're interior, it gets super cold here, like, you know, definitely lots of experience with like minus 40 or 45, but not that like wind exposure and sea ice kind of exposure. Like I would have to, that's the stuff that scares me kind of the most, I think. Like, how did you feel like doing the 1,000 like for the first time? Was that like what was the hardest part about it, I guess?
I don't know. I had such good conditions. I don't know, but last year there was that like going up and over Rainy Pass where we had that like super cold, strong wind just like straight at our face. Like normally my strategy is to like have a big hood. And so, you know, the wind kind of typically comes from the side. And so you have that to like shelter my face. But then last year coming up Rainy Pass, it was like just on the nose. And then it was the same exact conditions going across the, you know, the sea ice, Norton Bay. So I'd say if you can do Rainy Pass without getting too frostbitten on your face, you could do Norton Bay.
Okay. Well, that definitely helps. Oh, I had a question about that because you did last year. And I followed your tracker last year, and the year before actually. And so the year before in 2023, were you with a pack of bikers? Were you with a?
Yeah, I left McGrath with Julie, Perla Garcia, and then we quickly, like after a couple hours, we kind of created a foursome with Ryan Wanless and George Adams.
Yeah.
And then we traveled together to the ghost town of Iditarod, and Julie had a knee injury. And she had hoped that it wouldn't kind of like flare up and cause problems. But at that point, she decided like, this isn't getting any better. It's getting worse. I need to, you know, pull the plug. She was great. She was very decisive about it. And so she got a flight out. So then we continued on, me and Ryan and George. And then a day later, I was in the same place as the Italians. And so then we kind of became a group of 6. And then eventually Ryan got separated from the group. He just kind of stayed a little bit behind one day, and then kind of went on the group of the 3 Italians and George and me. So yeah, we did. It was the 5 of us then from Caltag on the Yukon River all the way to the end.
Finished. And then so which sounds super fun and very like, I don't know. Yeah, it's just it definitely, you know, from like a safety standpoint, I can see like why that happens. But I felt like last year you were totally on your own. Like and did you finish on your own?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel like in comparison to the year before?
Okay, so like the year before it was a blast, and it was awesome to be with race veterans who like kind of knew the trail, knew what to expect. And that was just so fun. And then last year, like I was kind of with like Ryan Wanless and Gavin Hennigan and Asbjorn. And then like at the end, they went a little bit ahead. You know, kind of I got into a pattern where like they would travel more, or at least Ryan would travel more like late at night. And my strategy was like, oh gosh, it's like 9 or 10 o'clock. I'm just going to like stop and sleep and then get up early in the morning. But then what was happening every night is there was fresh snow that came. And so then in the morning, then like when I was going over there, you know, over the part of the trail, like there was fresh snow.
Right.
And so, so it was harder and harder to keep up. I know now that I had low iron at that time. So I think that was really contributing to my like just kind of like feeling like I was working really hard and just not having the strength that I had wanted to. And looking back on it, that kind of started to like make me feel just like tired and kind of, I'm like, what's going on? What's wrong with me? You know, just a few days into it. So then, then at the very end, when I left White Mountain, there was a period of a few days of warm temperatures. And so, so I got passed by people on snowshoes and skis. I just like went right past.
That's where the skis, where it's like, oh.
Yeah. And I was post-holing and it was exhausting. And then there was like freezing rain and like big snowflakes and, you know, got like super wet. Anyway, it was like miserable the last 3 days. So the last 3 days took me, like I did that the previous year in one day. And this year it took me 3. And so I was like running out of like food and fuel, just really wanting to be done.
Yeah. Which you did, which was
I did finish ultimately. But I
So
would
like
say
drastically
like,
different experiences in a pack versus like, and I guess like, you know, the conditions also, you know, but even if you'd been like post holing with the group, at least it's like,
yeah,
I don't know, you're all
yeah,
together.
yeah.
But
And I'm someone who like very much like get extroverted. Like I very much like get energy and inspiration and motivation from being with other people. And so to be alone, I was like, oh, this is horrible. It's the
right.
worst.
Yeah, it was a very, it was a very solo dot watching you last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was cheering hard for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we talk about what's going on?
I feel like we covered a lot. I feel like I talked a lot. It's actually okay. So I have one thing to add to it because I just thought of it because of how much we've been talking about it, and it's actually been like really fun to kind of like revisit stuff again because I normally write like a race report after each one of my races, and I just like haven't had time to finish my Yukon one and start the ITI one. Anyway, I'm hoping that there's some time coming up, but I honestly really loved that. I think somebody who put a post out about this. Maybe it was um now I can't remember. Somebody put a post out about that like McGrath congregation of athletes and like having a day to like talk about what your experience was like and listening to other people's stories and just sort of like before you entered the the rest of the world again to like sort of like almost debrief your time out there. And I found my like one day, I spent one full day in McGrath. So I came in the middle of the night and then slept and then had all of the next day there to hang out and then had one more sleep there and then flew out the next day. And like literally the entire day was like a meal and sitting around talking about the race with like different pods of people. And I met some like really cool people that you just like don't get to see, you know, at all until if you know the finish line or if you get to see them at all. Yeah, it was just really fun to hear other people's stories, and I got to meet Tracy, which was like really cool. I did meet her at the start, like because I introduced myself to like whoever had skis, because I was like, oh, we're in like a little, you know, group, you know, together kind of thing. And so I did get to meet her at the beginning, but it was really cool to see her at the finish line. And I was sort of like not expecting. I felt like she was so fast that like she would have like arrived and been gone, but there was a lot of people waiting for flights to get out of McGrath, which I think is just kind of normal.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that day was just really cool, and I'm just really thankful for everybody who was there, and yeah, to get the chance to like talk to people about their races. So anyway, I guess what I wanted to say was this was really fun to talk about it again.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
And I do want to encourage you to definitely write it all down too.
Yeah, I find it really helpful.
Yeah.
And then when people are like, oh, how was your race? I can be like, well, how interested are you? Like, do you want the like super short verbal version, or do you want my race report?
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for sharing all that. That's awesome. Really fun to hear.
Thanks
Love
for
it.
having me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like, you know, having been a former racer, like, you know, obviously I wasn't at McGrath's, but I can like talk ITI all day, you know, and hear stories and all of that. So
yeah, it's fun. It's fun
great.
when everybody's receptive to it and gets it.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to share my screen.
Yeah.
And we can kind of hop over to the tracker.
So I can see it a little bit better.
Okay. So basically what we've got here is, you know, all the folks on bike are now at the coast. Great job, Julie, for getting to the coast 22 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And then we have the folks on ski and foot over here, just kind of getting to the Yukon River. So the trail comes up, and then Ruby is the first checkpoint on the Yukon River. So what we had over here is recently this morning, I think we had 7 people in Shaktoolik. The 3 who had been at the head of the race, Casey and Peter and Josh Brown, had taken a full rest day. So they stayed there for 2 nights. And then the Italians and Perry Jewett and Mike B got there. And so then the 3 previous leaders, Casey, Peter, and Josh, had set out and then come back. I think that was yesterday. So then this morning, the Italians went out first and didn't stop at Little Mountain, just blasted on through. And you can see that Robert is in the lead. And so they're all pretty closely bunched right here. Troy had said it was like a restart, like in 2019 when everyone got bunched up at the ghost town of Iditarod. And it's kind of like a restart in the race. So apparently, well, the winds have been really stiff out of the north, really strong headwind, and that can create a lot of drifting. And the Iditarod Trail Breakers haven't been through yet, and so they haven't staked the course. And so they're kind of waiting for conditions to change before they headed out. So it can be so disorienting in the, when it's like ground blizzard and windy, and if you're wearing goggles, if they fog up, it can all just be like really challenging. So, but they seem to have had a good day. Like, okay, they're only going 3 and 4 now, 3, but earlier they were going, great speeds, 6-7 miles an hour. So happy for them. And then on the portion between Unalakleet and Shaktoolik, typically most racers on bike will do that in a day. There is a safety cabin midway between. And this part is up until right where this TM, right where Thomas is, it's surprisingly hilly. You go through the Blueberry Hills, lots of climbing up and then going down to the coast. And then here you're climbing up and then going down to the coast. So that can be really tough. It's gorgeous to be able to see out onto the sea ice. Sometimes it's just frozen white. Sometimes there's like some blue leads. That can be really pretty. This descent down to the coast is it's just ripping fast. It's so fun. I can't imagine doing it as a musher. I would think that would be absolutely terrifying. You can see like when you go down, like where they've like really like put all their power into the brake to try to slow down and control the dogs. But and then once you get down here on the coast through the slough, it's like kind of like apocalyptic winds, like just so windy from the side, and it's like always like that. So that's a real experience, this last like 20 miles or whatever, maybe only 15 getting into Shaktoolik. 11, that's great. That's really good. So here we have Janice and Matt, her brother Matt. They're coming along. So she's the woman in the lead right now. And then at Unalakleet, we have Carl and Julie and Ryan. There's a great restaurant in Unalakleet called Peace on Earth Pizza, where you can go and get pizza, and you sleep in the restaurant on the floor. There's a really cool tradition where people can call ahead of time and give the owner, Brett, a credit card number and like buy pizza for racers. Started
like
with
that
doing
alone
it.
makes me want to do the 1,000.
Yeah,
that's what I was talking about. It's like, oh, I can't wait to get there.
Yeah, he does that for the mushers too. He has a whole big bulletin board, and so when people call in advance, he writes it down.
Nice.
And some people will call ahead too and be like, oh, I want to buy a pizza for any musher who doesn't have someone else, calling in a pizza for them. So it's a really, really cool tradition. Such a cool milestone to reach the coast. Like, what's really neat about this race is you start over here at sea level on the ocean, and you're going all the way through Alaska on the Yukon River and all this stuff, and then you get to the coast again. You just really feel like, you've really crossed the state. And it's a big place. So super cool. Over here in the foot and ski folks, Gavin Hennigan has been in Galena for over a day. He posted on social media that he has cellulitis. It's been causing him some pain in his leg. So he went to the clinic, and he might continue resting there for, what do you say, another day or two?
Yeah.
John Rickner is coming up behind him. Eric Bissett is the only skier in the 1,000. And then in Ruby, Kari Gibbons got to Ruby today. She was complaining about the hills. Like basically there's rolling hills all along here. And then the closer you get to Ruby, they just get like steeper and bigger and just so challenging. And it's such a long stretch too, to get to Ruby from McGrath. That's a long time of really remote conditions with just one small town, just 18 miles past McGrath. So kudos to her. She can now get some food that's not out of her bag. And then the fourth woman in the race, Magdalena Pasci, is coming up. So she should be arriving in Ruby tomorrow, probably. And then Daniel is the last person in the 1,000-mile race. So it's all very exciting. All the dog teams are currently between Caltag or south of Caltag on the Yukon River. So they go down and do a loop and come back up. So they're all down here. So pretty soon they'll be coming back up and then on the Caltag Portage. So hopefully they're still coming when these people on foot get to Caltag, but hard to know how the speeds will compare. So that's all I got in the tracker. Good. Well, this has been really fun.
Yeah,
nice to chat.
Great. You
yeah.
too. Yeah.
So cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And to those listeners, if you want more information, there's a daily write-up that's posted at itialaska.com, put together by the Wild Winter Women Group, which was started by Kari, who's the woman on foot who just arrived in Ruby today. And let's see what else. The tracker is also available on trackleaders.com/ITI25. You can track the dogs in the Iditarod race on Iditarod.com. So lots of other information out there. I should put a link to some of the books that we talked about.
Yeah, totally.
So cool. Well,
yeah.
Thanks everybody. And thank you, Jessie.
Thank you.